What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rovarno, and the New York Giants don't have much money left to spend after a very productive offseason in 2023 that saw them acquire big-time players like Darren Waller, extend big-time players like Daniel Jones, Dexter Lawrence, place the franchise tag on Saquon Barkley, and of course, signed their entire rookie draft class already, which usually doesn't happen until later on in the offseason. The Giants got it done pretty early on, signing Deonte Banks and most recently John Michael Schmitz to their rookie deals. So the Giants spent a lot of money. All those acquisitions that I just mentioned, those roster additions, it cost the Giants some pretty pennies. So they had a lot of cap space to start the offseason after making a lot of roster moves. But right now, they've dwindled down to $3.8 million in salary cap space for the 2023 season. Now, not a lot of money, not a lot of room to work with, but there's a lot of moves that the Giants could make to free up some cap space in case they were eyeing any free agents, such as DeAndre Hopkins, which I know a lot of Giants fans really want to see the Giants try to make a run on. Of course, there's also other guys out there, guard Dalton Risner, whoever the case might be. The Giants do have some roster moves that they could make in order to afford any of those free agents if they really want to stretch the limits of their salary cap maneuverability. So we're going to go ahead and dive into all of that, discuss how much space the Giants have, what they can do to get more space, and whether or not that's really a good idea. But before we dive into all of it, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into a review of the New York Giants salary cap situation as things stand right here, Monday, May 29th, 2023. So, when looking at the New York Giants and the moves that they made this offseason, again, you have some pretty high cap numbers out there because of the contracts that they most recently signed. Leonard Williams is another one that we're going to dive into in just a second, but the second highest cap hit behind Williams is Daniel Jones at nearly $22 million. So when you look at it, that's more than I think that's more than it would have been had they picked up his fifth-year option. But regardless, we all know the Daniel Jones contract. We know that it's structured in a way where the Giants can get out of it in 2 years. It could be restructured if they wanted to. They could free up money restructuring that deal. But right now, as things stand, it's very likely Jones's contract staying intact. We're just going to have to rock with that $21.75 million cap hit that he has. But some of the other big cap hits that we have on the Giants salary right now, Saquon Barkley at $10.1 million. That's, of course, the franchise tag fully guaranteed for this upcoming season. Now, there are a lot of conversations regarding Saquon Barkley and his contract situation. Some fans really want to see the extension happen ASAP. Others are fine, content with letting him play on the franchise tag. And at this point, it does seem like Barkley is also content with playing on the franchise tag. And here's why. The franchise tag is fully guaranteed. So that $10.1 million, no matter what, he gets every dime of it fully guaranteed. However, the drawback for the Giants is the fact that that full $10.1 million is going to be a cap hit. So they can't have, a situation where the guy's cap number is 15, but his salary for the year is 20 based on his average annual salary in the contract. That's not the case with the franchise tag. It's fully guaranteed. So for Barkley, from his perspective, if he were to play on the franchise tag fully guaranteed this year, then get franchise tagged again next year and make the salary cap hit for that, the franchise tag would be $12 million. So he would make $22 million totally guaranteed over the next 2 years, as opposed to signing a 3-year deal that potentially has less than $20 million totally guaranteed. Now, again, for these NFL contracts, it's all about the guarantees, which is why I don't think that this deal with Barkley is going to get done very soon. The Giants are going to have to guarantee him more than $22 million that he can make on back-to-back seasons on the franchise tag. So something to keep in mind there with Saquon Barkley in this contract situation. But right now, as things stand, it's very unlikely that almost $11 million cap hit or $10 million cap hit for Barkley is going to be coming down anytime soon. But let's see what would happen if they did come to terms with an extension on Saquon Barkley. They would actually save over $7 million in salary cap space by making that move. So extending Barkley, we know that the Giants want to. We know Barkley wants to be a Giant for life. If they're able to work out a deal, that right there will free up $7 million. The Giants will then have $10 million in salary cap space, actually $11 million because it's 3.8 plus 7.2. So they would have $11 million. But let's go ahead and tackle the Leonard Williams contract situation because that's the big one. A $32 million cap hit for a defensive lineman is in many ways a bit absurd. That's a lot of money for one defensive lineman. But for Leonard Williams, he signed that deal 3 years ago. This is the final year of the contract that he's going into, and he got paid For the reason that the cap number is so high this upcoming season is because it was restructured. His contract was restructured last year. They added a void year in 2024. So what the Giants can do here is they could extend Leonard Williams, and that would free them $13.5 million in salary cap space. That's a huge cap saving. That right there could be enough to go out there and sign a DeAndre Hopkins, because again, if you backload that contract, have that first year cap number lower, you could sign DeAndre Hopkins and probably have his cap hit in 2023 be under 13 million. So extending Leonard Williams does solve a lot of problems for you, does give you the opportunity to potentially go get a wide receiver one if that's what the Giants are targeting. Again, not saying that all these moves are going to be made. If they are made just to sign DeAndre Hopkins, they can be made to, sign other players to extensions or sign any of these lesser known free agents that are on the market. But again, DeAndre Hopkins being the big ticket item, it's a good reference point here. But saving $13.5 million in extending Leonard Williams, is it worth it? In my opinion, no. I actually don't believe that the Giants should extend Leonard Williams. I think that they should just eat the $32 million cap hit, live with it, and not touch this contract any further, because the only thing that they're going to do if they continue to maneuver this contract around, extend him, restructure it, they're only adding more money to future years. So extending Leonard Williams, yes, frees up over almost $14 million this offseason, but what are you really doing with that money if you're not signing DeAndre Hopkins? You don't need that extra $14 million. Sure, it's nice to have in case you have any emergencies midway through the season and need to sign somebody, but you can make other roster moves throughout the middle of the season to find talent if you need anybody in a pinch because of an injury. I don't think you need to go out here, free up this Leonard Williams contract. Listen, going into the offseason, we all believe that the Giants had to adjust the Leonard Williams contract. Well, they ended up signing their entire draft class, acquiring Darren Waller, signing Bobby Okereke, and all these other big-time moves without touching the Leonard Williams contract. So what does that tell you? They don't need to touch it. Leave it be. Let that contract expire so that you don't extend his cap hits into 2024, 2025, or 2026. Because the last thing that Joe Shea needs to do right now is go ahead and sacrifice future cap space for a 28-year-old defensive lineman, in my opinion. So I'm content with letting Leonard Williams just play out this final year of his deal, reevaluate next offseason. Another thing to keep in mind, Williams, 28 years old, just had his worst season in a few years. This past year with the Giants, played through some injuries, only had 2.5 sacks. If his play does decline this year, you're not going to want to have him at that high of a cap hit. You're not going to want to extend him for too lucrative of a contract. So again, I just think let him play out the 2023 season, renegotiate a contract extension next offseason, see where his performance is at, and see how much you're willing to pay him. Don't pay him prematurely, tie up future cap space to Williams when you don't even know necessarily how good he's going to be in 2023 and beyond. So hot take here. I know a lot of Giants fans really want to see that number come down. Totally content letting Leonard Williams play out this final year of his contract. But the other player who I'm a little 50-50 on letting them play out their contract is Adoree Jackson. I think Adoree Jackson is tremendously valuable to the New York Giants. Now, I will say the Giants have been pretty firm on their stance that they're going to let Adoree Jackson play out his contract. They have no plans to extend him. They will reevaluate at the end of this upcoming season, next offseason. And again, it's kind of the same situation with Leonard Williams. I think they're doing the same thing for both of these players. They just don't want to tie up future cap space to either one of them. They're both aging veteran players at the end of the day. Adoree Jackson's still a phenomenal talent. We saw how valuable he was when he was out with an injury and the Giants secondary fell apart. Adoree Jackson comes back into the lineup for the postseason, shuts down Justin Jefferson. Giants get their first playoff win in over a decade. That was pretty directly correlated to Adoree Jackson's presence on the field, because you look at the first Minnesota matchup, Jefferson goes for over 100 yards with no Adoree Jackson on the field. Jackson comes in, locks down Jefferson. That's the impact of Adoree Jackson. So in my opinion, I would be comfortable extending him for another 2 seasons. He's also 28 years old, like Leonard Williams. And if you were to extend him, you would free up $8 million in salary cap space this season. And I do think that is quite a bit to free up at this stage. You're in May right now. Again, not that many big ticket free agents out there. You're not going to really bolster your roster too much unless you go after DeAndre Hopkins and really revamp your receiving core. But I do think that $8 million is valuable, because that can probably get you solid competition at guard, a solid backup edge rusher, and a solid backup linebacker. Three positions of need, some depth positions of need for the Giants just by freeing up that $8 million. And again, it comes down to whether or not you want Jackson here long term. But in my opinion, I think he showed his value. I know that the injury history is the main concern here. You don't know if Adoree Jackson is going to be healthy for the foreseeable future, so you don't want to allocate future money to him when you don't know if he's going to be on the field. I get all that, but for me personally, I think that Adoree Jackson is a player that I do believe in, and I think that he could still be an effective player for the next 2 to 3 seasons. So I would be willing to extend him, but I do also understand why the Giants are choosing not to extend him. But I want to know your take on that down below. Do you want Adoree Jackson here for the next 3 years, or are you fine letting him play out this final year of his contract, reevaluating next offseason, and then seeing if he's worthy of an extension? But let's go ahead and discuss a few other players that could potentially be extended to free up some money. Here's a big one, Andrew Thomas. Extending Andrew Thomas would free up the Giants only $3 million, but I do think that's a $3 million that's very likely to be freed up sooner rather than later. It sounds like the Giants are already starting to get the wheels turning on the Andrew Thomas contract extension. It's going to be a big deal. He's going to be paid in excess of probably $25 million per season. So the main caveat here with extending Andrew Thomas, you're adding on a massive cap hit in 2024, 2025, 26, and so on and so forth. But it's going to happen sooner or later. In my opinion, it's better for the Giants to sign that deal with Thomas sooner because the trajectory that he is on in his career, he could have another first-team All-Pro season this upcoming year. He had second-team All-Pro in 2022. If he's first-team All-Pro in 2023, that salary is going to be even higher. The Giants are going to have to pay him even more money going forward. So it's very important, in my opinion, that Andrew Thomas gets signed sooner rather than later. I'm not even that worried about freeing up that $3.2 million for this upcoming season, but I do think that getting him under contract will allow the Giants to get him at a slightly cheaper price before the market gets completely reset the following year. It gets reset every year. Someone always sets a new record for highest paid offensive tackle. It just keeps happening. So the Giants are going to set that record with Andrew Thomas, but they can set it now at one price, or they could set it next offseason at a higher price. So again, I think that's a contract that's looming large that the Giants are going to want to get done sooner rather than later. Now, any other extensions that we can look at here? Graham Gano, that's a player that I could see them extending, low-cost contract for like another season or two. They would save $2 million by extending Graham Gano. And again, I could see that totally happening. A few other players, not much on the board here. Once you get past those players that I just mentioned, I don't really see any other extension opportunities except Xavier McKinney. Of course, his extension is kind of looming large as well, similar to Andrew Thomas. I think there's a good chance he does get extended maybe midway through this upcoming season or at the very end of next season, right before the offseason. But I will say it's not going to do much for their salary cap space if they extend him now, so they shouldn't be in any rush. They'd free up less than $1 million, $595,000 in salary cap space by extending Xavier McKinney this offseason. So again, I don't really think it's worth it. Let him play out this final year, or not final year. I think he has 2 more years on his contract. But again, it's coming up soon. No, it'll be his final year, right? Yeah, it'll be his final year because he did have that rookie season where he was mostly injured. No 5th-year option on his contract, of course, because he was a second-round draft pick. So 2023, final year on Xavier McKinney's deal. Again, I do think that you can just wait till next offseason to extend him. If anything, maybe you slap the franchise tag on Xavier McKinney and you give yourself a little bit more negotiating leverage and you extend him next offseason. But let's go ahead and move on to a few other ways that the Giants can create some cap space. Again, when you take a look at it, let's say that they extended all those players that I just mentioned. Leonard Williams, that's $13 million, or 13.5. Adoree Jackson is nearly $8 million. So right there, you've got $21 million freed up. Saquon Barkley gives you another $7 million. So there's $28 million. And then you can also free up $3 million with Andrew Thomas. There's $31 million. So when you look at it from that perspective, the Giants have $30 more million that they could free up on their salary cap by making some extensions. But again, I don't think many of those are very likely to happen. The one that I think is most likely is Andrew Thomas, which saves you $3.2 million. But the other ones, I think the Giants are content letting these guys play out their deals, minus maybe Saquon Barkley. But again, so much uncertainty with that contract situation. Negotiations don't seem to be going well. But of course, we'll see what happens, and I'll continue to update you all right here on Fireside Giants. But let's move on to the players that might be released as cap casualties to save some money for the New York Giants. Now, we're almost in June, only a couple days away. So I'm only going to look at the post-June 1st cap savings here. And again, some of these players, they're kind of no-brainers to shed some cap here. I think that, listen, a lot of Giants fans still believe in Shane Lemieux. Personally, I do not believe in Shane Lemieux. Cutting him to save the $1 million or the $1 million that you will save by cutting Shane Lemieux almost seems inevitable to me. But here's one of these players that really stands out. It's Darnay Holmes. Cutting Darnay Holmes will save the Giants nearly $3 million in salary cap space. Now, put that in perspective. You can extend Andrew Thomas to free up $3 million, or you can cut Darnay Holmes to free up $3 million. So that kind of puts it into perspective. Darnay Holmes may be making a little bit more money than he should be on his current contract, considering where his performance level is. Now Holmes in the mix with some of these other guys competing for that slot cornerback job. He's had it for the Giants for a couple seasons, a player that I do really like, but at a $2.9 million cap hit, I do think it's a bit rich for Darnay. I think there's a really good chance he does get released before the start of the regular season, and the Giants take that $3 million and just pick up somebody on the waiver wires who could probably have a larger impact than Darnay Holmes has on their defense. Outside of Darnay Holmes, again, I mentioned Shane Lemieux. Another player that I wouldn't sleep on here getting released is actually Aaron Robinson. Now, Aaron Robinson also in the mix here, competing for that starting slot cornerback job, but cutting him has a dead cap hit of $275,000 with cap savings of $1.1 million. So again, another player that makes sense as a potential cut candidate. And here's the exact numbers on Shane Lemieux. Dead cap penalty of only $86,000, freeing up $1 million in salary cap space. So again, a few of these back of the roster guys, Jeff Smith, wide receiver, who's supposed to contribute on special teams this upcoming season, he could get cut at the end of training camp, $0 in dead cap. $1.2 million in cap savings. And then Matt Parrott, another player, third round pick a few years ago, $208,000 in dead cap, 1.09 in cap savings if you release him. So again, a lot of these back of the roster guys here who could be getting released before the start of the regular season. Some more likely than others, but there's definitely some room here for the Giants to free up some cap space by releasing some of these players during training camp, at the end of the preseason. I mean, the Giants they're going to end up with 90 on the roster. They're going to have to cut it down to 53. So a lot of these guys are going to get released, and naturally they're going to have some cap space heading into the regular season, more than the $3.8 million that they have right now. But again, they can make some signings between now and the start of the regular season. They can restructure some contracts, extend some contracts, free up a lot of money, and maybe make one last splash with a guy like DeAndre Hopkins or somebody else at another position. Again, another player that I think not enough fans are keeping an eye on is offensive guard Dalton Risner, free agent, a lot of starting experience, plays left guard. He could totally step in and compete and maybe even steal that starting job if the Giants were to sign him. So keep an eye on him and a lot of these other edge, linebacker, and defensive line depth pieces that are out there on the free agency market, because I do think those are some positions that the Giants are probably looking to bolster just a little bit more before the regular season. But that pretty much wraps this one up. There's your breakdown on the Giants salary cap situation right now, as we are at the end of May, heading into pretty soon the second week of OTAs. And then after that, mandatory minicamp. And of course, in July, training camp. It's going to be really exciting covering all of these practices and all of these standout players that, really grab the spotlight at these practices right here on the channel. So of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and please comment your thoughts on the topic down below. But without further ado, I will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.